Welcome to today's deep dive.
Yeah.
Before we dive into the material, I actually want to start by offering a blessing for you. May God bless your day, your work, and, the entire week ahead of you. It is a real privilege to spend this time together.
It really is. And we got a fascinating topic today.
We do. So I want you to imagine, just for a second, being completely barred from your community. Like,
Yeah.
you can't go to your place of worship, your normal social life is paused, and this lasts for up to 80 days.
That's a massive disruption.
Right. And here's the kicker. You aren't being punished for a crime. You haven't contracted some deadly, contagious plague. You are isolated because you did exactly what you were supposed to do. You brought a new life into the world.
Yeah, it sounds completely counterintuitive to us today.
It really does. Today, we are looking at Leviticus chapter 12, which is a text that honestly often reads like this overly rigid, ancient medical manual about childbirth. I think most casual readers hit this section and just immediately skip ahead.
Oh, absolutely. It's a dense read.
Exactly. But we are pulling from the extensive notes of both the Holman Study Bible and the NWA Study Bible to really examine the sociological, the economic, and the theological framework operating underneath all these ancient purity laws. Our mission today is to understand why the ancient Israelites structured their society around these intense physical boundaries.
And to understand those boundaries, we really have to establish the actual protocols that Leviticus 12 outlines. Like, give a brief flyover.
Right, let's lay out the rules.
So the text mandates these specific, pretty non-negotiable timelines that a woman had to navigate after giving birth just to safely re-enter communal and religious life. For a baby boy, the baseline timeline is 40 days.
Okay, 40 days total.
Exactly. The first 7 days are a period of strict ritual impurity. Then on the 8th day, the baby boy is circumcised. Following that, the mother enters this secondary phase that lasts 33 days, which the text categorizes as a blood purification.
Got it. So 7 plus 33.
Right. And during this entire 40-day block, she is strictly prohibited from touching anything consecrated and is completely barred from entering the sanctuary.
See, that structural breakdown immediately introduces attention for the modern reader. When we see a 40-day isolation period following a major physical event like childbirth, our modern minds instinctively map that onto, like, a medical quarantine.
Oh, for sure. We view it through a medical lens.
Right. We think of a doctor prescribing 6 weeks of pelvic rest, telling the mom to avoid crowds to prevent infection. But the ancient text isn't operating on germ theory. And here's the part that really trips people up. At the end of this 40-day period, Leviticus dictates that the mother must bring a sin offering to the priest.
Yeah, that's a really loaded term.
It is. I mean, a plain reading of that translation suggests that the act of giving birth, or maybe the pregnancy itself, is viewed as a moral failure. Wait, is the text actually saying that bringing a child into the world is considered a sin here?
No, not at all. And that English translation of sin offering creates a massive barrier to understanding the ancient Near Eastern mindset. Both the Holman and Mebelier study Bibles actually address this right away. The mother is not morally contaminated.
Oh, wow. Okay, so pregnancy isn't criminalized.
Not even a little bit. Pregnancy is entirely celebrated. The foundational texts of this culture view children as profound gifts, the fulfillment of the divine covenant. And the circumcision of the baby boy on the 8th day is the clearest evidence of this.
Because it formally brings the child into the covenant community, right?
Exactly. While the mother is still in her isolation period, she is actively functioning as a vital instrument of God's blessing to the nation. The issue the text is addressing is ritual purity, not moral guilt. In fact, the Holman notes clarify that the Hebrew word used here is much more accurately translated as a purification offering.
Ah, okay, a purification offering.
Yeah.
So we have to completely decouple this concept of ritual impurity from the concept of sin. The mother hasn't committed a moral offense.
Right, exactly.
According to the NWA study notes, the ancient Israelite worldview tied ritual purity directly to physical completeness. The loss of blood, which is, the undeniable biological reality of childbirth, meant a person was physically diminished.
Because blood was viewed as the literal life force.
Yes. Blood was the life force of a living creature. To lose blood was basically to leak life. And in their theological framework, you could not enter the presence of God, who represents absolute, complete, infinite life, while you were in a physical state that represented a loss of vitality or, proximity to mortality.
That's a perfect way to put it. The physical body was essentially a theological canvas. When a person experienced a disruption to their physical completeness, whether that was through childbirth, illness, or other bodily emissions, they were temporarily incompatible with the sacred space of the sanctuary.
It's all about incompatible states.
Exactly. And the Holman source points out a crucial detail to really contextualize this so we don't get the wrong idea. This biological framework was not exclusively applied to women.
Right, men had rules too.
Yep. Just 3 chapters later, in Leviticus 15, the text outlines similar ceremonial separations for men regarding bodily fluids. The laws applied to the biological realities of both sexes. The sanctuary was cordoned off from the realities of human mortality, and blood loss was just the primary indicator of that mortality.
So the quarantine isn't punitive then. It functions more like a decompression chamber.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, think about a deep-sea diver. They can't simply shoot to the surface after being under immense pressure, right? They have to spend time in a decompression chamber, acclimatizing, just to avoid a fatal physical reaction. In the Israelite mind, giving birth was this monumental, life-altering event involving the loss of life force.
The pressure was immense, spiritually and physically.
Right. So the mother needed a structural 40-day decompression period to acclimatize her body and her ritual status before she could safely cross the boundary back into the sphere of absolute holiness at the tabernacle.
The decompression chamber analogy captures the mechanism perfectly. It is a protective boundary, not a penal sentence. The transition simply takes time. But the mechanism of that transition is where the text introduces a really significant and frankly controversial variable.
The double timeline.
Exactly. We established the baseline timeline of 40 days for a male child. But Leviticus 12 dictates that if a woman gives birth to a female child, the timeline completely doubles.
It just doubles across the board.
Yep. The initial impurity period extends from 7 days to 14 days, and that secondary blood purification period extends from 33 days to 66 days. So the mother is looking at an 80-day decompression period.
And that double timeline is definitely the most jarring detail in the chapter. To any modern listener, this immediately sounds like ancient gender prejudice. It looks as though they're saying baby girls are twice as impure or, I don't know, biologically inferior to boys.
It really does read that way at first glance. And as we look at this impartially, we have to acknowledge how problematic it sounds today. But both study Bibles strongly refute the idea that this is about female inferiority.
How do they prove that? Because on paper, it looks bad.
The proof is in the sacrificial economy. The NAA notes point to a piece of textual data that severely complicates our modern assumptions. At the end of the isolation period, whether it's 40 days for a boy or 80 days for a girl, the required sacrifice for restoration is exactly the same.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
The identical sacrifice is the interpretive key.
Precisely. If the cultural intent was to institutionalize the inferior spiritual or social value of a baby girl, the sacrificial requirements would reflect that disparity. The cost of re-entry to the community would be graded based on the child's worth.
That makes total sense. The fact that the sanctuary demands the exact same offering proves that the spiritual value of the child and the mother remain constant regardless of the child's sex.
The discrepancy does not lie in the realm of spiritual value at all. It lies entirely in the realm of biological reality.
Okay, so if the accounting remains identical, we have to explain the calendar. Why does the biology of a female infant require an 80-day decompression instead of 40? I know the sources present 2 fascinating theories for this arithmetic.
They do, and they're both deeply rooted in ancient biology.
Right, so the Holman Study Bible suggests this generational theory. The idea is that when a mother gives birth to a female child, the ancient mindset recognizes that there are essentially 2 female life cycles present in the room. You have the mother who just gave birth, and you have the infant who carries the biological architecture of a future mother.
It's the concept of nested generations.
Exactly. Because 2 female life cycles are entirely present, the physical time frame for ritual purification is doubled to reflect that dual biological reality.
Yeah, that Holman theory leans heavily into how the ancient Near East viewed descendants as physically present within their ancestors. Now, the NWA theory approaches the same biological reality from a slightly more pragmatic angle.
What's their take?
It focuses on the specific mechanics of ritual impurity we discussed earlier, specifically blood loss. The baby girl inherently carries the biological potential for future menstruation and future childbirth. Both of those realities involve future blood loss.
Oh, I see. So it's about compounding potential.
Right. Because the infant introduces an entirely new potential for ritual impurity into the world, the mother's timeline is extended to account for the weight of that biological future.
Both theories anchor the discrepancy firmly in biology rather than sociology. The ancient Israelites were mapping their laws onto the physical realities of the body as they understood them. They viewed the female capacity to generate life as this profound, weighty reality that commanded a longer structural boundary.
It really forces a complete reframing of the text, doesn't it?
It does. Instead of viewing the 80 days as an extended punishment for having a girl, it functions as a societal acknowledgement of the complex nature of female biology. We really have to step entirely out of our modern socio-political frameworks to see it through their ancient theological lens.
Absolutely. The body's processes dictated the parameters of their relationship with the sacred space. And this leads us directly into the mechanics of how that relationship was restored once the calendar finally ran out.
Right. How do you get out of the decompression chamber?
Whether after 40 days or 80 days, the mother had to transition back into full communion with her people. The NAA source maps this transition in 3 distinct stages. Stage 1 is the initial acute impurity. Stage 2 is the prolonged blood purification phase.
And the notes make a crucial distinction regarding this middle phase, right? The woman is technically in a liminal state.
Exactly, a liminal state. She is neither acutely impure nor fully pure.
She's in the middle of the decompression process. The pressure is equalizing, but she still cannot approach the surface.
That's right. The threshold is finally crossed in stage 3, which involves presenting the sacrifices at the tent of meeting. This is the moment the text mandates the presentation of a 1-year-old lamb for a burnt offering alongside a young pigeon or a turtle dove for the purification offering.
Bringing those animals finalizes the restoration.
Yep, it clears the mother to fully participate in the sanctuary and the community again.
But, I mean, the requirement of a 1-year-old lamb introduces a stark economic reality into this theological system. In an agrarian, ancient society, a yearling lamb is a massive asset. It represents food, wool, the reproductive future of a flock.
It was a serious investment.
Yeah. So demanding a premium agricultural asset from a family simply because they had a child functions like a really steep re-entry fee to society. For a wealthy herdsman, surrendering 1 lamb is a manageable religious tax. But what if a family simply couldn't afford a lamb? Do they just stay isolated forever?
That is the exact question, and the text anticipates that exact economic fracture. Leviticus 12.8 contains a built-in concession that theologians often refer to as the poverty clause.
Poverty clause.
Right. The law explicitly states that if a woman does not have the means to afford a lamb, she is permitted to bring 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons instead, 1 for the burnt offering and 1 for the purification offering. This is a radical economic pivot.
Because the market value of 2 common birds compared to a yearling lamb is just minuscule.
Exactly. It's night and day.
The Holman notes really highlight this, emphasizing that this poverty clause reveals the foundational character of God. The ancient sacrificial system was not designed as some extractive economic engine meant to funnel the wealth of the populace to the priesthood.
Right. If the goal was wealth extraction, the law would demand the lamb regardless of the family's ruin.
But by allowing a virtually costless alternative, the law proves that God's grace provided a concession for the poor. It shows that the willing, obedient spirit of the worshiper mattered far more than the monetary yield of the sacrifice. The system is designed to ensure the sanctuary remains democratized.
The poorest mother in the camp has the exact same access to restoration and the divine presence as the wealthiest. The grace is literally architecturally built into the law.
That's beautiful.
It is. And this specific economic concession creates one of the most profound historical Easter eggs in the entire biblical narrative. If we move forward from the establishment of this law in Leviticus all the way to the 1st century in the New Testament, we see this exact poverty clause utilized.
Wait, by Mary and Joseph, right? In the Gospel of Luke?
Yes. Luke chapter 2 details Mary and Joseph traveling to the temple in Jerusalem to fulfill the days of purification after the birth of Jesus. And the text explicitly notes that they offered a sacrifice, according to what is stated in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons.
They didn't bring a lamb.
They did not bring a lamb. The inclusion of that specific detail by Luke is highly intentional. It firmly establishes the socioeconomic reality of Jesus' earthly family. They were operating in the lowest economic bracket, entirely unable to afford the standard yearling lamb.
Wow, the theological implication there is staggering. The incarnation of the divine entered the human structure at the very margins of society, subject to the exact physical boundaries, biological limits, and economic concessions established centuries prior.
The King of Kings utilized the poverty clause just to fulfill the baseline requirements of the law.
That is incredible. And knowing that Jesus' family participated in these specific purity rituals creates this seamless bridge between the ancient physical laws and the broader spiritual themes explored in the New Testament.
It really does. The physical boundaries of Leviticus were never meant to be the ultimate end goal.
Right. The Holman study notes explain that these tangible, rigid rules about blood, days, and biology were essentially pedagogical tools. They were physical object lessons designed to teach a developing nation about the absolute holiness of God, and that a person's spiritual relationship with God is more important than their physical attributes.
The Israelites needed physical architecture to understand spiritual concepts. The physical laws established a vocabulary of purity and impurity that Jesus later utilized and, honestly, completely transformed.
Yes, and we see that transformation so clearly in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5, which the Holman notes explicitly reference regarding these purity laws.
The woman with the issue of blood.
Exactly. Mark details the story of a woman suffering from a chronic hemorrhage for 12 years. And reading that story through the lens of Leviticus 12 and 15 changes everything. This woman wasn't just experiencing a devastating medical issue.
Her biological reality meant she was trapped in a state of severe ritual impurity.
She was stuck in stage 1 for over a decade. She was socially marginalized, unable to touch anyone without rendering them impure, and permanently exiled from the temple and the presence of God.
Because under the Levitical framework, impurity flows outwardly. If an impure person touches a clean person, the clean person becomes impure. The miasma of mortality contaminates the clean space. So when this woman pushes through the crowd and touches the hem of Jesus' clothing, the ancient law dictates that Jesus should instantly contract her ritual impurity.
But the exact opposite happens. The flow of impurity is totally reversed. Jesus' purity and inherent life force flow outward into her. He cures the physical hemorrhage, instantly stopping the biological reality of blood loss, and by doing that, he completely shatters her 12-year sentence of ritual impurity.
He is the ultimate complete source of life. Proximity to him restores her physical and spiritual completeness.
That narrative event perfectly encapsulates the theological shift from the Old Testament to the New.
It really does. The Holman notes conclude their analysis by identifying Jesus as the ultimate immaculate sacrifice. He replaces these temporary physical rituals with permanent spiritual purity. The rigorous boundaries of Leviticus, the days, the isolation, the animal sacrifices, they were temporary decompression chambers pointing toward a permanent reality.
Through his life and ultimate sacrifice, Jesus renders those biological decompression chambers obsolete.
Yeah, offering a spiritual purity that entirely transcends human biology.
Well, the journey through this single chapter has been remarkable. We started with a text that, on its surface, reads like a dry, maybe even discriminatory medical manual. But by examining the cultural and theological context, we uncovered how the ancient Israelites utilized biology to comprehend the sanctity of life and the weight of mortality.
It's just so layered.
It is. We unpacked the gendered timelines, discovering that it was rooted in the compounding reality of female life cycles, rather than some judgment of human worth. We found a radical economics of grace embedded in the poverty clause, and we saw how all these strict physical boundaries pointed toward the deeper spiritual healing offered in the New Testament.
I think it really demonstrates the value of refusing to skim past the difficult or seemingly archaic passages in the text. The foundational framework for grace and restoration is built meticulously within these ancient legal codes.
Absolutely. Well, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. These ancient Israelites used highly visible physical boundaries like waiting periods, specific offerings, and geographic limits to teach their community about spiritual purity and the value of entering God's presence. In our modern world where we don't have these physical rituals or literal decompression chambers, what boundaries do you put in place to protect and prioritize your own spiritual health and connection? Thank you for dedicating your time to explore this text with us today. God blesses all the listeners.